The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread, but the warmth of a family meal never reached Leah Morgan. She adjusted the strap of her dress and took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she thought would be a quiet memorial dinner for her parents. A night of shared memories, maybe a few laughs, something to honor the people she had just lost. She hadn't expected a battlefield. Rebecca, her eldest sister, sat at the head of the table, her posture sharp and commanding, like a queen surveying her kingdom. As Leah stepped forward, Rebecca's eyes flicked over her, cold and calculating. "Oh, look who decided to join us," she said with a fake sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. Then, with shocking precision, Rebecca kicked Leah's chair out from under her. Leah stumbled but caught herself, blinking in disbelief. "Adopted children don't eat with real family," Rebecca said, each word heavy with malice. The room erupted into cruel laughter. Her siblings joined in, high-pitched, mocking, echoing against the walls like a chorus of cruelty. Leah felt the sting of humiliation, the sharp edges of their scorn pressing against her chest. But she didn't falter from her bag. She pulled a simple cream-colored envelope and set it deliberately on the table. Silence fell immediately. The laughter sputtered and died, replaced by uneasy glances and shifting chairs. "I'm Leah Morgan," she said, voice calm, steady, carrying a weight that seemed to hush the room. "Tomorrow we're meeting with lawyers. My parents will. And their estate. Everything will be reviewed." The effect was immediate. Mocking smiles wilted into tight-lipped tension. Eyes widened, the sudden panic obvious. Leah could see the cracks in their confidence, the first signs of fear behind their feigned composure. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the chandelier casting long shadows over faces suddenly stripped of arrogance, and yet, this was only the beginning. And the way every smile died in that room? Leah whispered to herself, letting the weight of it hang in the air. That wasn't even the real beginning. The siblings had no idea what was coming next. But Leah did. And tonight, a seed of change had already been planted. Growing up in the Morgan household, Leah always felt like she was orbiting a world that didn't quite include her. From the earliest memories, the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle exclusions were constant. Family photos were the first battleground. In almost every picture, her siblings leaned together, heads close, arms entwined, while Leah was cropped out or shoved to the very edge, a quiet afterthought. Ethan, ever blunt, didn't even try to hide his contempt. "She tries too hard to be one of us," he'd whisper when he thought no adults were listening. Natalie, on the other hand, wore a mask of sweetness, her smile dripping with condescension. "Of course you can join us if you want," she'd say, but the eyes never lied. They weren't really welcoming. Even ordinary moments carried the sting. The cookie scene at age 11 still haunted her. Leah had baked a batch for the family, hoping to share something special. One bite, and Ethan sneered, "You really think you belong here?" While Natalie rolled her eyes, tucking crumbs into the napkin as if the effort itself were offensive. But not everything was cruel. Her parents' love was a steadfast, quiet force. One afternoon, when tears had welled from yet another snide comment, her mother pulled her aside. "You're our daughter in every way that matters," she whispered, pressing a hand to Leah's cheek. Her father was always in the front row at recitals, staying up late to help with homework, never questioning her worth. Those moments were sanctuaries, proof that even when her siblings rejected her, she had a place where she truly belonged. That pattern, the small humiliations, the sideways comments, the smirks behind polite words, etched a lifetime of awareness into her. She learned to navigate around the cruelty, to protect herself while soaking up every ounce of her parents' genuine affection. Their love was real, solid, the only thing that made me feel like I belonged in that house. But everything changed in the 6 months that broke me open. When both my parents fell ill, there was no hesitation. I packed a bag, kissed Adrian and the kids goodbye, and moved into the house that had once been my childhood sanctuary. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders instantly, but I didn't flinch. Adrian stayed home with Ava and Mason, giving me the freedom to focus. "Do what you need to do," he said softly. "I've got us." His quiet support was a lifeline in a world that suddenly felt unsteady. The siblings' excuses were predictable, almost rehearsed. Ethan claimed he couldn't leave the bank due to exposure to sensitive accounts. Natalie said she had to stay with the twins, though they were old enough to manage on their own. Rebecca insisted she simply couldn't bear to see our parents in pain. Each reason, though different, had the same effect. I was left alone in a house that suddenly felt larger, emptier, and heavier than ever. The days blurred together. Hospital chairs, long waits, signing paperwork I didn't fully understand, holding my parents' hands as they slept and as they cried. I combed Mom's hair in the mornings, whispered reassurances into Dad's ear at night, tried to catch every fleeting moment of their presence before it slipped away. I learned the weight of their breaths, the subtle shifts in their comfort, the fragility of the people who had once been my anchors. And then it happened. They both died within days of each other. The grief was immediate, raw, and all-encompassing. I sat with their empty chairs, traced the contours of their favorite mugs, and felt the absence echo through every corner of the house. Yet, when the funeral came, my siblings transformed. The ones who had vanished during months of illness now appeared polished and solemn, presenting themselves as devoted children, grieving as if they had spent every moment at my parents' sides. Their smiles were tight, their eyes practiced, their hands suddenly steady on the casket. I watched them, silent, feeling the bitter taste of irony. All the absence, all the excuses, and now the performance. And then, after the funerals where my siblings suddenly played the roles of devoted children, they made an announcement. When Rebecca called me, her voice coated in saccharine sweetness, I should have known something was off. "Leia, we're hosting a memorial dinner," she said, almost chirpy. "Would you mind handling the cooking? You're always so good at it." There was a pause, a faint chuckle, and then, "It'll be a real help to all of us." Her words sounded like a compliment, but I felt the first twinge of unease. Still, I wanted to believe grief might bring us together. I spent 3 days in the kitchen, chopping, sautéing, and baking with care, imagining my parents would have loved seeing us gathered, remembering them. My hope clung stubbornly to the idea that shared loss could soften hardened hearts. Arriving at Rebecca's house, the first thing that struck me was how too perfect everything was. The garden, the freshly polished floors, the air scented faintly of vanilla candles. It all screamed rehearsed. Inside, the family moved with unusual stillness, voices lowered to hushed conversations whenever I approached. Eye contact was scarce, smiles too quick, too practiced, as if they were performing for someone unseen. By the time I carried the last dish to the table, the message was clear. I was no guest. "Leia, could you serve the food?" Rebecca asked, voice casual, as though requesting this was normal. I froze, then obeyed, placing platters with trembling hands while they watched like directors inspecting a scene. And then the conversation shifted. "It's time we talked about the inheritance," Rebecca said, finally breaking the surface tension. "The house. Mom's jewelry. The investments." Natalie's voice cut in, smooth and deliberate. "It's best if they stay in the bloodline." Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, eyes cool. "We're not cutting you out, Leia. But the majority should stay where it belongs." The logic landed like a hammer. Biological ties. Bloodlines. They framed it as common sense, unquestionable, inevitable. The message was unmistakable. I was, somehow, outside the equation. I felt the weight of years of exclusion press down all at once. Every childhood slight, every cold glance, every whispered insult. It all threaded into this moment. I wanted to speak, to defend, but the words stuck in my throat as they rehearsed their lines of entitlement. And that was it. Something in my chest went very still, a quiet so sharp it felt like clarity. All the careful cooking, all the hope, all the attempts to belong. It had led here, the chair, the humiliation, the words that would hit me next. They were waiting. And when I reached into my bag and drew out the envelope, I understood fully what I had been made to do. "What you made me do," I whispered, almost to myself, letting the weight of it settle. The room didn't yet know the storm it was about to face. The envelope, simple and unassuming, held the power to turn everything upside down. And for the first time I was ready. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, a quiet authority that seemed almost ceremonial. The walls were lined with framed legal certificates, and a large oak table dominated the room. Leia walked in, Adrian by her side, holding Ava and Mason's hands tightly in support. The siblings were already there, flanked by their spouses, Rebecca with a tight-lipped smile, Natalie whispering to Clara, and Ethan adjusting his tie nervously. Even their spouses seemed tense, aware that this wasn't going to go the way they expected. Adrian squeezed Leia's hand. "You don't owe them anything," he whispered, his voice a steady anchor. "Not a single thing." Leia nodded, letting his words settle in her chest, a small comfort before the storm. Arthur Sullivan, the family lawyer, cleared his throat, his presence commanding silence. "We are here today to read the final will of Margaret and James Morgan," he began, voice steady, measured, carrying the weight of authority. He opened the thick folder, pausing just long enough to let the tension thicken. "Everything," he said deliberately, "is left to Leia Morgan." The room froze. Forked glances, widened eyes. And then Ethan's voice broke the silence, sharp and incredulous. "What? We're their biological children. How can this be?" Sullivan didn't flinch. "This will was revised 8 months ago, at a time when your parents were fully competent and evaluated by licensed physicians. They made their intentions clear." Clara stepped forward, voice tentative but aggressive. "We want to contest on grounds of diminished capacity." Sullivan held up a hand. "Your parents anticipated this. I am reading directly from their personal note. Leia is the one who never left our side. She cared for us when you were absent. She deserves everything we can leave." The siblings' faces went pale. Natalie's hand clutched her husband's arm. Ethan sputtered. This is unjust." Leia's voice, calm but burning with righteous anger, cut through the tension. 6 months. Where were you when they needed you? Did you even care enough to show up? Sullivan continued, flipping to the clause everyone dreaded. "Any attempt to contest this will result in forfeiture of all sentimental items. Family heirlooms, letters, keepsakes, all returned to Leia automatically." The final blow came as Sullivan emphasized a critical detail. "And to be clear, Leia was not present when any revisions were made. She did not influence a single decision. The choice was entirely your parents'." Silence filled the room. The siblings had no words, no defenses left. Their protests had been rendered meaningless by foresight and careful planning. Leia exhaled slowly, letting her presence fill the room. "I want peace. But I won't negotiate my parents' wishes. They made their choice. And so did you." Arthur Sullivan placed a final envelope on the table. Leia opened it with trembling hands, revealing her mother's handwriting. "You were always ours. Now let us take care of you the way you took care of us." The weight of those words sank in, mingling grief, love, and vindication. For the first time in years, Leia felt the clarity of justice wrapped in the comfort of her parents' unwavering trust. The room no longer felt tense. It felt empty, hollowed by the truth they had ignored for too long. And in that emptiness, she finally understood. She had done nothing wrong. She had only honored the love that had always been hers. Adrian was waiting in the car, his hands wrapped around the steering wheel, eyes soft but steady. "They lost you long before they lost the inheritance," he said quietly as I slid into the passenger seat. For the first time in months, I let the weight of everything hit me. The grief, the love, the relief. I cried silent tears that burned and cleansed all at once. The following days were a storm I had anticipated but didn't fully brace for. Ethan's calls came first, sharp and threatening, demanding explanations and trying to intimidate me into giving up what was rightfully mine. Natalie arrived at my door, tears streaming, sobbing about misunderstandings and family unity, as if years of absence could be erased by a single confession. Rebecca sent flowers, cards, even letters filled with excuses and pleas about miscommunication and how they meant well. I listened. I observed. I felt none of the guilt they tried to heap onto me. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to shrink, apologize, or make space for their manipulations. I had boundaries, and I was done bending them point one by one. I faced them, calm but resolute. "I forgive you," I said to each, letting the words land like a gentle, unyielding shield. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild what you destroyed. It was a declaration, a finality, a reclaiming of the power they had tried to steal with absence, cruelty, and entitlement. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I didn't shrink. I simply stood firm in the love my parents had shown me and the strength I had carried through those impossible months. Weeks later, at a grocery store, I ran into Dana, the social worker who had helped my parents. She told me about two little girls who'd lost everything. 8 months after the storm of loss and betrayal, Leah met two little girls who had lost everything. Lila and Hazel, ages 4 and 3. Their tiny hands clung to hers, eyes wide with uncertainty. But in that moment, Leah knew she could give them the home they deserved. Bringing them home felt like coming full circle. Ava and Mason watched curiously as the sisters explored every corner, tentative at first, then bursting with giggles. That night, Ava read aloud from her favorite book while Mason shared his beloved bear. Lila and Hazel nestled close, finally safe in the warmth of a home built on love, not obligation. 1 year later, the backyard overflowed with life and sunlight. The 4 children ran through dandelions, their laughter mingling with the breeze. Adrian stood beside Leah, smiling. "This is the real family," he said. And she knew it was true. Blood hadn't given her this life. Love had. Choice had. Courage had. That if you've ever been pushed aside by the people who should have protected you, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below and hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves you.